Reborn after the partitions, entered the interwar period with an obvious need for recognition on the international arena. Striving to overcome civilizational backwardness, the Polish state wanted to manifest its identity through art and culture. To achieve this, it pursued displaying itself at international exhibitions and world fairs. Starting with the 1925 International Exhibition of Decorative Arts and Modern Industry in Paris, all the way up to the World of Tomorrow World Fair in New York in 1939. Official Polish pavilions showcased the craft of contemporary Polish architects. They highlighted the distinctiveness of Polish culture, especially in the first years of independence. Their creators used folk art elements as a reference to the Polish national style. On the other hand, they showed an awareness of current trends and pursued a Polish version of the international style in order to send the message that Poland was modernizing. A decade after regaining independence, at the 1929 General National Exhibition in Poznan, Poles and international guests could admire the great civilizational, cultural and economic leap that the Second Polish Republic had taken since 1918. The exhibition was supposed to strengthen the image of Poland as a modern, dynamically developing state. Like the somewhat younger Levant Fair, the Poznan exhibition was a kind of laboratory of modern architecture. One of the showpieces of reborn Poland was Gdynia, a port city growing rapidly starting in the early 1920s along a stretch of the Polish Baltic coast. Just as Poles boasted Gdynia in the 1930s, the Jewish community of Eretz Israel boasted modern Tel Aviv in British Mandate Palestine. The first Hebrew city went up in just 3 decades on the dunes by the Mediterranean Sea north of Jaffa. Zew Aleksandrowicz came to Tel Aviv from Kraków. He photographed the young city as it developed and began to bustle with life. Jewish immigrants from Poland settled in Jewish Palestine in large numbers, starting in 1924, the so-called Garabski Aliyah. In the 1930s, many Polish institutions set up branches in Tel Aviv, including PKO Bank, Orbis Travel Agency, and LOT Polish Airlines. Polish films were screened in Tel Aviv cinemas. From the very beginning, the city was to serve as a lighthouse and an entrance gate, welcoming successive waves of Jewish settlers, known as Aliyahs, arriving in the land of their forefathers. The Tel Aviv coat of arms made this clear. Its founding fathers also intended it to be an important commercial center. One of them, the first mayor of Tel Aviv, Mayor Dizengoff, claimed that Tel Aviv itself was an exhibition city in the best sense of the word, because it demonstrated the power of human will and the victory of creative effort. In 1930, the Tel Aviv fairs, organized since the 1920s, became a miniature, a model city, an educational maquette, an episodic spectacle of good governance, abundance and prosperity, regional balance and free trade between East and West, the Old and the New World, mother countries and their colonies. The first editions of the event, called the Palestine and Middle East Exhibition and Fairs, were local in scope and character, with no goods from outside Palestine on display. In 1929, during the fourth exhibition, Foreign companies were allowed to participate for the first time, although no goods competing with local products were showcased. The chief architect of the fair at that time was Arya El-Hanani. He was assisted by Pinkas Hut, born and active in Lviv for some time, a former student of the Chernivtsi University of Technology. In the wake of the success of the 1929 exhibition, the organizing committee decided to make the fair fully international in the future. The ban on competing non-local goods was lifted. The entire event was renamed the Levant Fair and received its own emblem, designed by Arya El-Hanani, a winged camel that became the butt of political jokes. One of them claimed that such a creature would certainly facilitate emigration to Palestine. The first official Levant Fair was held in 1932 in Neve Sha'anan, a district of Tel Aviv located along the railroad tracks to Jaffa and Jerusalem. The fair grounds covered an area of 50,000 square meters, twice the size of the 1929 event. Opened on April the 7th, the Levant Fair continued until the end of the month. In his inaugural speech, the High Commissioner of the British Mandate of Palestine, General Arthur Warchow, emphasized that the fair successfully illustrates the energy and entrepreneurship of the people of Tel Aviv. It also provides an opportunity to show the people of Palestine and foreigners the development potential of local trade and industry. The modernist buildings housing Jewish institutions and organizations alluded to avant-garde currents. The City of Tel Aviv Pavilion, resembling Vladimir Tatlin's Monument to the Third International, and the complex of pavilions of the Jewish Labor Federation, Histadrut, sparked associations with constructivism. Other pavilions, which we can recognize in the film chronicle from the beginning of the fair, alluded to national or historical styles, as well as various sorts of vernacularisms. Designers often used Art Deco forms, ornaments and typography. Some pavilions made reference to reductive classicism, or even pre-classical antiquity. For example, the Palestine Potash Limited Pavilion was shaped like a mastaba. In 1932, many pavilions at the fair, including the British, Romanian and Soviet ones, had a modern box-like form with a flat roof. They differed markedly from the Polish pavilion, raised in the Zakopane style in reference to the art practiced by the Highlanders of Podhale. The complex of pavilions of the Jewish Labor Federation, Histadrut, was designed by Aryeh Sharon, a Bauhaus graduate born in Yaroslavl. His proposal was open, light, cheap, modular, easy to disassemble and reassemble, and above all, eliminating the discrepancy between external and internal design. The Polish pavilion at the 1932 Levant Fair was shaped like a Zakopane-style Polish mountaineer's cottage. With an area of 200 square meters, it was situated, as its commissioner proudly noted, in the busiest place of the fair, on the way to the Luna Park. Its designers cared little for the local Mediterranean climate, the specificity of the site or new trends in architecture. Instead, they drew a clear connection between Polish national identity and folk culture, which had used Highlanders as its symbol since at least the 1925 Paris exhibition. Above a columned porch, the facade boasted a large tympanum with the Zakopane motif of the rising sun. One can easily notice the emblem of Poland above the semicircle of the sun disk. In between the sun rays, Art Deco letters make up the inscription Polish Pavilion. With its tent-like roof, the Polish Highlanders cottage certainly stood out among the simply shaped modernist buildings around it. During the 1932 fair, the Polish Pavilion was visited by Kazimierz Kurnikowski, Consul General of the Republic of Poland in Jerusalem. At that time, the Polish-Palestinian Chamber of Commerce, which operated with the support of the Polish government and the Jewish Agency in Jerusalem, was responsible for setting up the pavilion. In September 1932, a few months after the fair, the Chamber published the first issue of Palestine and the Middle East. The magazine broadly described, among other things, Polish activity at the Levant Fair. Over 40 companies from Poland, representing 30 industries, had taken part in the 1932 fair. The fair gold medals had been awarded to Konopacki Brothers Wood Industry and the plywood factory in Mosty, and to the Polish-Palestinian Chamber of Commerce for proper organization of the Polish Pavilion. In 1934, when Tel Aviv celebrated its 25th birthday, a second exhibition was organized, officially known as the Levant Fair. In view of the success of the previous fair, the Mandate authorities agreed to erect a permanent fair infrastructure. It was supposed to occupy an area of about 100,000 square meters on the northwestern outskirts of the city, on a peninsula bordered by the Yarkon River and the Mediterranean coast, in the immediate vicinity of the Maccabea Stadium. The main goal of the fair was to strengthen international economic and trade relations with the Middle East, especially with the Jewish population of the British Mandate. Fair visitors traveled to Tel Aviv by sea, land and air. Those from Poland arrived aboard the Polonia and the Kościuszko. Both steamers belonged to the Gal Gdynia America shipping lines and carried passengers on the Palestinian line between Constanta in Romania and Jaffa, Tel Aviv. The general plan of the 1934 Levant Fair was developed by the urban planner and architect Richard Kaufmann, who came to Palestine in 1920 after studying at German universities. The planner grouped the exhibition buildings and pavilions around public squares and other open spaces. There were 5 sections: Palestinian, A; British and Imperial, B; Foreign and Middle East, C; Amusement Park, D; and Maccabean Stadium, E. The Palestinian Industry Pavilion, designed by Kaufmann himself, dominated the set. In line with current trends, the body of the pavilion resembled a gigantic ocean liner. Its tower dominated the entire exhibition. The pavilion, decorated with the Tel Aviv coat of arms, was located at the end of the fair's main thoroughfare and provided the backdrop for the fair's central square. A 2-story concrete statue of the Hebrew worker, designed by Arya El-Hanani, the author of the winged camel at the entrance, was erected in the square. The fair technical office, headed by Arya El-Hanani and Willie Welch, commissioned talented local architects to design the fair pavilions. Their works reflected the latest achievements of European modernism, adapted to the local climate. The group included Genia Averbuk, Shlomo Ginsburg, and Elsa Gidone Mandelstam, who together designed the famous Café Galina. These rising stars of Tel Aviv architecture were joined by Joseph Neufeld and Aryeh Sharon, among others. The latter adapted the pavilion complex of the Histadrut Jewish Labour Federation, designed in 1932, to the new space. The new shape of the Tel Aviv Pavilion was also similar to that of its predecessor from 1932. The Woman and Home Pavilion can be considered a symbol of modernization, not only in architecture, but also in social life. It is no surprise that the British Pavilion in the British Imperial Square stood out among the non-Palestinian buildings. In turn, the Foreign and Middle East section was dominated by the General Foreign Pavilion. It occupied an area of 3,000 square meters and was the largest of the exhibition buildings. It was located opposite the Polish pavilions. The General Foreign Pavilion stood at the end of the access square in front of the main entrance. Among the foreign pavilions located near the square, the pavilions of Belgium, Lebanon, Romania and Bulgaria, in addition to the Polish pavilions, attracted attention due to their form, details and size. The three Polish pavilions, along with 4 kiosks, occupied an impressive area of some 1,100 square meters, more than 5 times the size of the Zakopane Pavilion from 1932. They were fully functionalist in form, with flat roofs, a rectangular shape, and a clearly marked horizontal structure. The main building, the State Pavilion, made of reinforced concrete and intended to house successive exhibitions during subsequent editions of the fair, was designed by the chief architect of the Levant Fair, Aryeh El-Hanani. It showcased the State Export Institute's exhibition of samples and designs, as well as the stands of the Polish Savings Bank, PKO, the Maritime Office in Gdynia, the Council of the Port and Waterways in Gdansk, the Polish and Colonial League, the Gdynia America Shipping Line, the Company of Overseas Trade, and the Polish-Palestinian Chamber of Commerce. The shape of the State Pavilion, and of both of the temporary pavilions, was so expressive and modern that they appeared alongside other selected fair buildings in propaganda photomontages made by Mojżesz Worobiejczyk, Moshe Raviv. The captions stated, "The entirety of the Polish exhibition, richly decorated with flags and national emblems, made a great impression and attracted tens of thousands of visitors." A special fair issue of the Palestine and the Middle East magazine, which contained texts in Polish, Hebrew, English and French, contributed to this propaganda success. Władysław Lichtenstein was an architect and interior designer who studied and gained his professional experience in Berlin and Paris. Throughout his career, however, he was mostly associated with Łódź, at 27 Kościuszki Avenue, and then at 78 Piotrkowska Street. He ran the company Władysław Lichtenstein Interior Design. Its activities redesigning and furnishing warehouses, cinemas, flats, confectionaries, arranging shop windows, exclusive cafes and dance clubs, not only in Łódź, but also in Poland's capital, Warsaw. In his designs for advertisements, Lichtenstein repeatedly used visual symbols of the big city, for example, neon lights. One of his most successful implementations was the modernist window display of the Suchard confectionery shop at 111 Marszałkowska Street in Warsaw, realized in 1936. Lichtenstein was very successful in designing exhibition spaces. He was the author of the stands of several companies at the 1929 General National Exhibition, PWK, in Poznan, which summed up the progress made by the reborn Polish state. when the members of the board of the Polish-Palestinian Chamber of Commerce, responsible for preparing the 1934 Polish exhibition at the Levant Fair, asked Liechtenstein to design it, the Łódź architect already had significant achievements under his belt. Both of the temporary pavilions, the Polish Industrial Pavilion and the Łódź Pavilion, were designed by Władysław Liechtenstein. Their light structures, resting on wooden frames, were erected within a short time from elements shipped from Poland. Their shape, front facades with towers, and the ship-like curves of the rear facades counterpointed the rectangular shape of the central pavilion. The construction of the Polish pavilions was photographed by Zef Aleksandrowicz. Liechtenstein was also responsible for the interior design of the entire Polish exhibition, including the pavilions and kiosks. The efforts of the Łódź designer were appreciated by the fair jury. He received an award for the Łódź Pavilion and for the entire Polish exhibition. In the aftermath of the success at the 1934 Levant Fair, and due to Liechtenstein's fruitful cooperation with the Polish-Palestinian Chamber of Commerce, the architect was invited to design the Palestinian Pavilion at the 1935 Poznan International Fair. Several days before the opening of the next Levant Fair, scheduled for April the 30th, 1936, an Arab uprising broke out in Palestine. Jews outside Palestine also protested against these violent incidents. The riots were accompanied by a strike of Arab workers in the port of Jaffa, which for some time made it impossible to unload ships bringing exhibits to the fair. The Tel Aviv authorities therefore decided to build their own port. The authors of the Palestinian Line advertising brochure promoted travel to Tel Aviv, writing, "It is the duty of every future-thinking buyer and industrialist to go to the Levant Fair." Over a year before the event, Shlomo Jaffa, the director of the Levant Fair, born in Grodno, was to travel in the opposite direction, from Tel Aviv to Poland. His destinations included the Poznan International Fair and the port of Gdynia. Jaffa was also supposed to inquire about the possibility of Jews from Palestine taking part in trade fairs in Poland. The official opening of the fair in 1936 was again attended by top dignitaries, including the High Commissioner of Palestine, Arthur Wauchope, and the first mayor of Tel Aviv, Mayor Dizengoff. The latter emphasized that the fair had become a major stimulus for the development of the Palestinian economy and had contributed to the growth of the immigration movement. In a short fragment of the film chronicle from the opening of the fair, one can see the Polish pavilion twice. This confirms its excellent location in the fair's central square. Polish participation in the next Levant Fair was of great importance. Leon Lewiter, president of the Polish-Palestinian Chamber of Commerce, on the eve of the fair claimed that the economic ties between Poland and Palestine, half of whose Jewish population comes from Poland, will be made tighter by the Levant Fair. He added that the new Polish exhibition would be highly commercial in nature, unlike the 1934 exhibition, which had been designed with propaganda purposes in mind. One of the reasons for this was the reduction of the area of the Polish exhibition, which was confined to a single pavilion, the permanent one. It now had to accommodate both state institutions and private enterprises, such as the Gdynia America shipping lines or industrial companies from Łódź. 2 years later, the Turkish pavilion was built on the site of the Polish temporary pavilions, which were demolished after the 1934 fair. The permanent Polish pavilion was rebuilt, gaining a slightly larger area in the front part. The co-author of the design was the engineer Heman Zabłudowski. The rearranged facade with the inscription Polska and the date 1936 used fewer glass surfaces, now concentrated around the entrance and slightly protruding. The side of the pavilion was marked in 3 languages, English, Arabic and Hebrew, with the Polish eagle next to these inscriptions. Both the typography and the state symbol had a sophisticated modern form. The co-commissioners of the Polish exhibition at the 1936 Levant Fair were the aforementioned Heman Zabłudowski and Artur Anker, Vice President of the Polish-Palestinian Chamber of Commerce. Maksymilian Eliowicz, a painter and the president of the Union of Jewish Artists and Designers, also known for his activities in the field of interior design and shop windows, was responsible for the exhibition design. The presentation of Poland at the fair was complemented by an exhibition of Polish books, organized by the Awangarda Society for International Trade in Polish Books. The output of 20 publishing houses was displayed inside a special kiosk. There was a separate section dedicated to Marshal Józef Piłsudski on the first anniversary of his death. As a result of political tensions immediately after the end of the fairgrounds were rapidly transformed. A port which needed storage facilities was being constructed in their immediate vicinity. The surviving equipment of Jewish factories and workshops, partly destroyed in nearby Jaffa during the Arab Revolt, were moved to the huge empty post-fair pavilions. Over the years, the original purpose of the buildings was forgotten. Many of them were demolished. Others, heavily neglected, had undergone far-reaching adaptations. The entire area took on a commercial and recreational function. Currently, the Conservation Office of the City of Tel Aviv-Yafo is overseeing works on the revitalization of the fairgrounds and at least partially restoring them to their former glory.